celebrate 20 years of Wall of Sound, a label that launched in 1994. It's been responsible for releasing records by Royksop, Human League, Grace Jones, Le Rhythm Digital, British Electronic Foundation, featuring Boy George, among others, Tiesto, and even Banksy. It's one of the most influential and hedonistic labels of all time. Banksy described his time working with Wall of Sound thus: spending time with Wall of Sound is like being in an epic road movie without a map and no road. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an indication of, what we have in store. Now, you might know this chap to the right of me as the mad guy in pink who annoys people with funny questions at IMS, but he does have another life. He's also the founder and the driving force behind this legendary label. So we're going to chat a little bit about Mark's story and how his label has kind of influenced the dance scene. We've also got a selection of people who've been key players in the dance music industry for the last 20 years, who've also seen a lot of change and directly influenced change themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and compare and contrast sort of how things were and how they are today. Anyway, I'm going to start by just getting our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves. So maybe Mike and Claire, if you could start.
Hi, I'm Mike.
Obviously.
Maybe a little bit about, most people probably know, but a bit about what you do.
We threw a party called Manumission for 15 years.
Mm-hmm. It was the biggest weekly party in the world for that time.
And yeah, it was kind of a big, wild, crazy theatrical event. And we stopped doing that 7 years ago, and we've been working on a feature film. And
to see if we can revolutionize cinema.
Yeah.
Kind of like we did the club scene.
Yeah.
Good stuff, thanks. Mark?
I am me. And that's it, really. I started this record label 20 years ago, and that's why we're all gathered around this table. But it's been a very interesting journey, and I did some other stuff before that. But we'll talk about that in a little while.
Okay, thanks, Mark. George?
I'm George. I'm a DJ, I'm a musician, and a vegan, and a homosexual. All of those 4 things are very important. And I love music, absolutely. That's, music has given me everything I have in my life that's good, so that includes, dance music, pop music, all music, from an early age. Music has been the sort of salvation of my life. That's why I'm here.
Great, thanks. Danny?
I'm Danny. I started a record label that kind of pioneered rave, jungle, drum and bass back in 1990, and called Suburban Bass Records. I moved on to create some of the UK's biggest album brands, Pure Garage, Euphoria, Pure R&B, urban brands and dance brands, and did parties in Ibiza under the Euphoria brand as well. More recently, I've moved into film production and a film production company and trying to bridge that gap between music and film, as well as managing artists, one of which was signed to Wall of Sound, and I've known Mark for 20 plus years, unfortunately.
And Steve, finally, please.
My name's Stephen Kempner. I'm a music lawyer at Sheridans. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. Worked with a lot of EDM type artists, and have been involved in a lot of the groundbreaking deals for artists such as Deadmau5 and Swedish House Mafia.
Amazing. And Mark.
And Wall of Sound.
You have that legal babysitting duties. It must be a very easy job, I'm sure. I'm sure he's very fastidious about contracts and making sure everything gets signed. And
attention to detail.
Okay, so we've actually got a little teaser, trailer video for a 20 Years of Wall of Sound film, which is currently in production, I believe. So that gives you, for the uninitiated, it'll give you a little bit of a flavour of the label, and for the initiated, it'll remind you of the things that you can't remember, because, well, you were there. Okay, if we can run VT. Thank you.
I didn't have any idea of anything back then. Most people will probably say that's still the case now.
It's a great pleasure. By the early 1990s, the dust was settling on the UK music scene after the seismic underground acid house explosion.
This is acid, man.
The DNA of much of Britain's youth had been chemically altered, and thousands of young people were suddenly producing electronic music in their bedrooms, promoting their own dance events, or starting their own record labels.
It must affect the brain in some way. Unless it's just the music that does it.
I want to find out how one maverick figure named Mark Jones, a former singer in a boy band no less, kick-started a pioneering, crazy, iconic independent record label 20 years ago. A label that's involved Banksy, Grace Jones, Stuart Price, Shirley Bassey, Royksop, The Human League, Reverend and the Maters, Propellerheads, and lots more bands, artists and DJs, all unique in their own ways. How did such a pioneering independent record label achieve such dizzying success when it's run by someone who is frankly a bit unhinged? From the vinyl age and into the digital future, Wall of Sound has spawned a string of hits, a lot of wild parties, some crazy creativity, and 20 years on has reached an iconic status. But how? This is the story of Wall of Sound.
Okay, as if by magic. You spoiled the punchline, guys. So, Mark, we're going to start with your early days. I wasn't actually aware of your how you started out in music.
How did I start out in music?
Yeah.
How did I start out in music?
Yeah. So maybe you can talk about your band and that kind of thing.
Well, how did I start in music? I mean, yeah, I had an older brother and sister, and so I reacted obviously against everything they liked. So he was into rock and reggae and other things. Sorry, George, about that. But yeah, so I convinced my mum and dad to buy a Yamaha CS01 synthesizer for, I don't know what it was, $5.99, 74 weeks, something, as you do.
HP.
Yeah. And I just obviously reacted against anything real musically, so anything synthetic with sounds of creation and then evolving into synthesizers and the electronic pioneers. But I was always really into melody as well. So, and I don't think pop has to be a 4-letter word. It doesn't have to mean shit. It's melodic, melodies live with you and can work in that way. So I was trying to just combine that in certain ways and learning musically. Melodies were always in my head, so I used to write a lot of songs and a lot of lyrics. I was doing the visuals at the beginning of, I set up a little company with a friend of mine to do visuals at clubs because no one was really doing it. And then we did the first ever Shoom club on all the early acid house clubs, Trip and Sin and all those clubs. I did the visuals at all of those clubs. People don't really know that. No. But I couldn't really connect that with what was going on with the acid house revolution when Danny and everybody came here, because I came here a little bit before that as well, and joined the two. So we were working forward, and then, yeah, the band I formed was signed to London Records, which is quite odd, because Pete Tong was working there. And yeah, so we had this, I mean, obviously Andy Warhol says, is it 15 minutes?
15 seconds
15,
now, I think, but originally it was 15 minutes.
It was 15 minutes. Well, we had about 7.5. So I did the band thing, and that was quite interesting. There's some...
So because when you told me this yesterday, I didn't know, and I thought it was fascinating that you were going to all of these pioneering acid house parties, doing the videos, you're on the dance floor, doing your crazy acid house stuff, but then you're also fronting a kind of rock pop combo, and you were on the cover of, and you were quite the heartthrob, if we can show the cover of Mark on Just 17. So you were doing it for real. It wasn't like, you know, you weren't a pretend pop star. You were a genuine pop star. There he is. And the other one, I think there's one from Number One as well.
Could Mark Jones be in your stocking?
If only. There he is. But I do think it's fascinating that you're involved in that pop world, but obviously.
Well, it was melody. It was melody for me, and I don't think, you know what I mean. That was the thing. It was just expression, a form of expression as well. But obviously, we were put in a certain box then when all that kind of thing happened, and it did evolve. I did do remixes of the tracks, but people were just freaked out a bit with it because they weren't really joined. You couldn't really join those dots on certain musical forms back then. You know, you were in a box. People want to tag you like they did with the label, but we'll come on to that a bit later. People want to put you in a box when they don't know what something is.
Because it's probably a sort of similar experience that you had, I suppose, George, because you've obviously one of the biggest pop bands in the world, but you were really getting into club culture and DJing and that sort of stuff. Maybe.
Well, I think in the UK, there's this sort of attitude that if you've been successful at one thing, you've got no right to be successful at another, and people really begrudge you doing other things. So the first time I ever heard house music was at the Paradise Garage, and I was actually making an album with Culture Club, and it was really overproduced, and I sort of went to this club on the weekend and heard this amazing music and was like, oh my God, what we're doing so wrong. But it was too late, we were in the middle of it. And that record was a record called Set It Off by Strafe. That was the record that really changed my life. And, you know, that was the beginning for me. And then when sort of the band kind of stopped working, Spectrum, Shoom, all of those clubs appeared. And I remember going, I do remember the visuals, but I didn't remember that you did them. But I remember being at Spectrum and there was like 30 people there, you know, and it was, I don't think anyone really knew what was going to happen and how exciting it was going to become within a matter of months. And for me, you know, because I'd stopped doing the band, you know, I had a lot of time to kind of go out. So I just became a sort of fully fledged clubber and was going to all these raves and just constantly, that became my life, you know, and buying records. And then sort of ended up kind of DJing in a back room for, what was it called? Pushka. Yeah. I was at Pushka one weekend and they had this chill out room and they were playing this cassette tape. And I said to Debbie, you know, and whoever was running it, it's Debbie, I think. I said, you should get a DJ to play in here. It's really boring having this tape all night. And they said, why don't you do it? So I turned up at the next Shoom with my cardboard box full of 45s. And I just played everything from, you know, old reggae to kind of Islands in the Stream and old house tunes and Heaven 7, everything you can think of. And that's kind of how I ended up kind of, you know, being a DJ, because I started doing back rooms. You know, it was like, oh, Boy George is in the back room. And I'm still here annoying everyone. But yeah, that thing of, you know, sort of, oh, you know, like when I first started DJing, it was like, oh, you're only getting DJ work because you're Boy George, which was true, obviously. And, you know, this sort of attitude that, like, you sort of overnight become someone, like, oh, yeah, you know, it takes years to get to a point where you can do the things that you want to do. And I think for me, you know, as I said earlier, I love music and I love dance music, and you know, that's why I do it. You know, there's no other reason. You can't do this if you don't love it, because it's a lot of traveling, a lot of staying up late, and you have to love it. And I do love it, you know. But in the case of Mark, I just think he's one of those sort of unique people with too much personality. I was one of them as well, you know. And I just think, you know, it's no... I do remember you as a pop star as well. I just suddenly went, I remember you. Yeah, of course. I thought you were fucking gorgeous. And it's hilarious, you know.
Still is.
No, of course he is. Of course he is. But, you know, Mark, you know, you've been one of those people that have been around so long. Everyone knows you. Like, people, if they don't know you, they go, it's the bloke who wears pink, or he's nuts, you know. But again, I think you're just one of those people that loves music, you know, on all levels. And I think that's why we have to do what we do, because that's what drives us, you know.
Okay, great.
That's a long answer. I do apologize.
That was fantastic answer. Thank you. Maybe I'd like to bring Mike and Claire in, because obviously you founded Manumission on the island 20 years ago as well, I think, at 94.
20th anniversary now.
I was there.
Oh, yeah.
I know I don't look that old. But, anyway, so obviously you guys have had a lot of interaction with Mark. Mark programmed some of the rooms for you for a while. Like, maybe talk a little bit about that. And I mean, you guys, you know, everybody on this panel could have a panel to themselves, but it'd be nice to hear some of those, you know, fruity stories from back in the day, and like, because they were fun times, and I think they were kind of slightly different, more hedonistic times than now.
Ibiza back in the day was much more anti-corporate and wild and free, and we were looking for a new cool sound to bring to the island, and we were told by friends anything Wall of Sound is great. So we tracked down Mark. We met in London, got on like a house on fire, and he said, look, I want to introduce you to some of my DJs. So then we ended up developing this amazing friendship with pretty much everybody on your label. We brought them to Ibiza, and just nobody'd heard that music before, had they?
It was really fresh. It was
like a little revolution, you know, it was... And it grew. I mean, the first time when I think Stuart was playing on the Terrace of Space, and he played Madonna, and, you know, they were just like, nobody knew what to do, but very quickly, it just became part of the island, didn't it?
Yeah. It was very interesting times.
certainly was.
I don't actually remember much, but what happened?
I don't know. Where do we start?
On the bar, I was like,
he was there, Fernando.
I was like,
sucking his own penis.
and I remember thinking, it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, just thinking, I need to go home.
Oh my God, yeah, we really like to bring the DJs with us on our adventure.
Yeah.
And it was pretty much 36 hours a week. It was a 36-hour party every week, and we literally dragged them with us. Mark was even on stage with us once.
Yeah, do you remember what you did for me on stage?
I do.
What, do you want to tell them what you did to me on stage?
No, I'm not sure if I want to tell them or not. Oh. You can tell them.
She gave me breakfast. Yeah? It was a frying pan, wasn't it? You came out with the frying pan, I'm sitting in, and the egg popped out.
We laid eggs on stage.
She laid an egg for me in the frying pan on stage.
Yeah. And then Mike cooked it.
And I cooked them in the frying pan.
He cooked it.
That was you and Stuart Price.
That was breakfast.
And Johnny the Dwarf, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have nothing else to say.
Well, I'm sure we can. We'll come back to these. Well, we could talk all day about these stories. I'm
I
sure.
think someone needs to write a book.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah. Someone needs to write several books, I think. But I'm just interested in bringing the other guys in, lest they waste away. So, Stephen, I just. I don't want this just to be a funny Mark Jones story panel, but that would be a really good panel. So,
Mark Jones breakfast.
maybe Stephen, you can tell the QPR story, because that amused me yesterday when he.
Oh yeah, well, Mark and I share a love of Queen's Park Rangers Football Club, and.
Any other QPR fans here? Well, there's two.
And I lived right next to the ground, and at the last minute, Mark was sponsoring, Wall of Sound was sponsoring one of the games, and he asked me to come along. And I just said to my then partner, I'm just popping out to the football match that Wall of Sound are sponsoring. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, and I think I came home sometime the next Tuesday or something. And that was the start of the end of my relationship, really. So, thanks, Mark.
And Danny, obviously your history, you ran Suburban Bass. You've been friends with Mark for a long time. You've been running record labels and working in the music industry for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in your perspective on how the landscape has changed from from when you started to to how things are now.
It's changed dramatically. I mean, you have that kind of longevity in your career by being passionate about music, and that's what this guy's got. I mean, his enthusiasm. You can see it. It's right there in front of you. And anyone who thinks he's a little bit crazy, it's that passion and that enthusiasm for music. That's what we're all doing up here. And yeah, I mean, I've had a long career in it as well. I've seen lots of changes. And the thing that George said as well, when you are successful at one thing and then try and do something else, people maybe try and hold you back from doing that. Don't want you to be doing that. Suburban Bass was very successful as a jungle drum and bass label, one of the pioneers in that scene. And I felt that I needed other challenges, other things I wanted to do. I ended up having to close down that label, whilst it was still successful and still selling a lot of records, so that I could then pursue other things in the music industry and give myself new challenges. For me, it was always about, the thing that was exciting about that early rave scene when I started the label was that it was all new and it was all innovative, and everything that was happening, it was incredibly exciting because, you know, it hadn't been done before. There was no guidebook to what we were going to do next. And when you start getting into the sort of time when it's the same old thing and you're going through the motions and people know what to expect from you, change it up, do something else, and go another way, and keep what you're doing exciting. As far as the changes I've seen in the industry in the last 20 years are dramatic, and I think, you know, we all know sitting here how the internet has affected that, and during that period, I was heavily into the compilation albums, and so I was doing the big branded albums in the UK. And that sort
Pure Garage and Pure Grooves and
Pure Garage, yeah, Euphoria was a big brand, and you know, that just dropped off dramatically. And obviously, you know, I don't need to tell anyone here, you know, the music industry was slow to react to that, but we're seeing it come around again now. I mean, we just released Pure Deep House, and that was almost 3 months in the top 10, and back to a level of healthy sales. I mean, I'm not going to reveal our sales figures, but you know, we're back to good numbers. And the interesting thing is now, with those good figures, we're seeing pretty much a 50-50 split. We're seeing sort of digital and physical copies. People want, you know, a piece of hard copy in their hand. They want to buy the CD, and it's sort of come back to that. So, you know, it's been a little bit of a, you know, 10-year cycle maybe. It dropped off in, you know, 2005 for us.
Which is really interesting. I mean, you know, especially like but hard format stuff coming back is it's pretty exciting.
It's quite satisfying for us, you know. I mean, we're all a little bit old school, and like, you know, I want to get a CD. I don't want it all to just be like it's just on that, you know. But it's convenient, but. I think people want to see the care and consideration in your packaging and, you know, how you're putting things together. Yeah. And, you know, people still got a love for vinyl. We're seeing, you know, lots of indie labels, you know, producing vinyl, and you know, that's the people that are just passionate about music, you know. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what format it comes in. We're consuming more and more than we ever have. Maybe not everyone's buying it, but there's more consumption of music, and you know.
Okay. And what's your best Mark Jones story?
Oh, I remember about as much of those days as he does, so don't even ask me. It's like,
okay. Okay, so actually, George, I'd quite like you to talk about sort of, because you've been coming to Ibiza now for...
Since 87.
87.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to get your take on the changes that you've seen on the island, and, you know, in just the culture, the music, the clubs.
I mean, in some ways, I kind of prefer Ibiza now because it's a bit more civilized. So, some people kind of moan about how, it's, you know, it's not as exciting as it used to be, but I don't know, I find, because I'm sober, I find it a bit more of a civilized place to come to. But in terms of what's happening now, there's this kind of gentrification of the island, and I mean, we're in a place now that's the beginning of this whole VIP thing, which I think is a little bit of a worry, because, you know, basically fuck the VIPs. They're sort of boring bastards, basically, aren't they? I mean, you know, if you go to a club and there's a VIP section, you know it's going to be pretty shit, you know. And, you know, I like the idea of, like, somebody told me a great story about, there was this great club in London called Nag Nag Nag, where I think Paris Hilton turned up and said, "Is there a VIP section?" And they were like, "No." Sorry, love. I mean, I think the problem with the whole poshing things up is that it affects the music. And when you listen to these guys talking about the kind of early rave scene, one of the things that was very significant about that was that it was all connected to personalities. If you think of any of those artists, you know, they had a look, they had a vibe, you knew who they were. And we sort of in an age now where you don't really know who anyone is. You know they're huge, you know they're selling millions of records, but you couldn't really sing one of their songs if you tried. think about the first time you heard I Need Your Love or an early Wall of Sound record or anything like that, you know, those kind of records. And I think a lot of it is about context. It's where you are, what was happening. If you remember the early rave scene, you know, there was government trying to shut it down. So it made the whole thing really exciting. And I think coming to Ibiza originally, you know, going out to clubs where there was no roof and you were in nature and you were hearing house music, and, you know, it was so liberating because you couldn't do that in London. You know, you just couldn't do it. But, you know, you have to kind of move with the times. I think, you know, moaning about how things are now is kind of boring. It's like, you know, there are other clubs to go to. There are other things to listen to. You just have to make the right choices with music. And, you know, whenever I see a sparkler in a bottle of champagne, I know I'm going to have a shit gig. You know, as soon as I see, like, one of those things flying across the room, I know it's, oh, God, it's going to be over. You know, someone's going to come up and ask me to play Rihanna or something, you know. So, you know, and I think we also have to kind of, you know, there's lots of great things about British music that we don't champion enough. You know, we don't big ourselves up enough, you know. There's lots of great music being made in the UK, but if you look at how the Americans do it, they're so proud of what they do and they really push it. And I think we need to do more of that. We need to be more proud of what we create, because the British sound is the best. It is the best. You know, it is.
That's why I started the label in the beginning, because electronic dance music had become so diluted and there wasn't meaning or feeling in that. You weren't allowed to say, I love Steely Dan, I love Kraftwerk, I love hip hop, I love this, I love that. And so we threw all of that together because certain electronic music and dance music just didn't have any meaning or feel. And that was the beginning of it. I mean, obviously when I left the band thing and, you know, I bumped into somebody at a record shop called Mark Lesnar, who had a company called Soul Trader, a distribution company, and I went to work there to learn the other side of what we do, so to speak. And then people like Basement Jaxx and, you know, lots of people, Kruder and Dorfmeister, I gave them, or we pressed them 500 copies of a piece of vinyl to put in a shop, you know, to help them start. And it was almost like a collision of electronic music there. And that's how, you know, it evolved from there on. And it's about being who you are, not somebody else. So if there's artists or managers in this room, that's, for me, the most important thing. Be who you are. Now with the internet, obviously, and the whole online situation, it has done some damage to us as a record label, but what it has done is it brought new generations in touch with music at a click. Because before, we had to go to a record shop or hear it on a radio or something and then find a record, but now people have access to that. So I do think that collision of sounds has come around again now.
Great. Guy, I'm really sorry, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, which is a shame, because we could talk all day with you interesting characters. I'm going to see if we've got some questions from, anybody got some questions from the floor, so we can, this, over there, this lady, get a mic. It's my Dimbleby. Gentleman at the back in the tweed jacket. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Caroline, and I run a business called Radar Music Videos, which is a network of directors. It strikes me that one of the defining characteristics of Wall of Sound was finding fantastic personalities who were making fantastic music as well. Do you think there are less personalities around in the scene today? Is that a harder job to do?
No, obviously you're saturated because of the internet and everything else. You know, there is so much access to everything.
I really think there are a lot less characters around. In Ibiza, the gay scene used to be amazing. Yeah, I personally think there are a lot less real characters. You know.
They are there. You have to find them.
And maybe it's.
But I mean, they did say that thing. You know, they always say, don't work with your heroes, don't work with your heroes. And then I did the album with Grace Jones and the Human League, and that was an experience. And, you know, the most inspiring people, you need to be inspired and driven.
Yeah.
The scene has become a lot more corporate. Before, it was really much more of a rebel scene. So it wasn't the average choice, it was the exceptional people that came here. Now it's the mainstream that come here. And the DJs were paid a lot less, and we could do anything we wanted, and we did. You know? And so there's a massive freedom. And if you look at old videos of how things were, and I don't like to harp on about the past, but everybody was having a party in the room, as opposed to everybody standing with a iPhone or a smartphone filming some huge overpaid DJ with confetti cannons and, yeah, exactly. So there's been a big change to the scene, you know, and it needs a shake-up, really.
Sorry, George.
I think you have to be... There is, I think if you're, you know, if you're young now, though, and you're going to clubs, it is exciting. You know, if you're 16, 17, 18, what's happening now is exciting. We're older, and we can't see it in the context of somebody who's 15, 16, 17, 20. You know, it's not the same for us. But I think, you know, for my little niece and nephews, you know, the things that are happening now, they're amazing. You know, we're a bit jaded. We have to be careful.
But can I just say one more thing to that question is, do what you do, because online, with the barrage of everything that is online, if you do something alternative and different, it will stand out.
Yeah. Okay. We got time for one more question.
One.
Okay. Sorry, this lady here, quickly.
Actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to go. I don't know if I'm allowed to go slightly off topic, but my question is for George. I know you're coming back with Culture Club, who's been announced a couple of days ago.
Off topic.
It's not about him.
20 years of Boy George.
Have you got a label?
Yes, we have independent label. Yes, we're independent. Yeah. I'm going back tomorrow I'm recording with Culture Club right now. I'm going back to Spain, well, another part of Spain, tonight to carry on recording. Yeah.
Great. Very quick one, yes, please.
Mark, I've seen you at the Record Club in Camden, and you've started a sort of a rock and rave, you know, with Killer Flow. Are you going to bring that to Ibiza?
It's not rock and rave.
It's my
I've
word.
renamed it RDM.
Well, my word is rock and rave.
Rocktronic dance music. Have you not heard it?
It's
amazing. I mean, obviously, we've been combining guitars and electronics for a long time, and certain places just haven't really got it. But now, in America and everywhere else, they're asking for things that combine EDM with other things. So watch out for RDM. There'll probably be a panel on RDM here next year. So, yes.
Okay. Guys.
The picture?
Yeah. Well.
Or the cake. Oh, right. Oh, what?
Oh, here we go.
Happy birthday to you.
You blow it out. Happy birthday to you. Steve Aoki. Cake him.
Right, I did call my cake dealer earlier, but he didn't come, so I will give that out to the room. Thank you so much for coming, and I just want to say this, but I appreciate all your support and help, and everybody on this panel joining in, and I want to say thank you.
Thanks, guys.
There's one more thing. There's just one more thing. Somebody sent me a picture earlier, which I think we could end this on, and somebody on a Chastabate website. So what I want to do is give someone a T-shirt to copy him. You want it?
I'm not doing it.
You want it?
They don't pay me enough.
Is anybody out there? Thanks. No? Okay, fine.
And on that note, a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you very much.